Alice's Restaurant. To most folks, it's just that song that gets played in its 18-minute, 34-second entirety on classic rock radio stations around Thanksgiving every year. This year celebrates the 50th anniversary of the Thanksgiving dinner that inspired the song, which inspired the movie, which inspired the song to be played every year afterwards. Arlo Guthrie's a folk singer, and the son of the famous folk singer, Woody Guthrie. In 1965, Arlo was 18. The Vietnam War was well underway, and men his age were prime targets to be drafted into the Army. Not wanting to be drafted, he enrolled in Rocky Mountain College in Billings, Montana. Wanting to spend Thanksgiving with his friends Ray and Alice, he hitchhiked across the country from Montana to Massachusetts. Ray and Alice were living in a deconsecrated church that they were in the process of remodeling. Alice used to be a librarian at Arlo's boarding school, but quit in order to open a restaurant, The Back Room. After the Thanksgiving dinner, Arlo and his friend Richard noticed that because of the remodeling, they had a lot of trash lying around. They loaded up a VW microbus and took it to the dump, only to find out that it was closed for Thanksgiving. Arlo was from the area, and he knew of a place where people would go to illegally dump their trash. After disposing the garbage, they went back to the church, and Arlo wrote the main verse of Alice's Restaurant, but nothing else. After that, Arlo gets arrested, goes to court, gets drafted, but ends up not being enlisted because he was arrested and considered not moral enough to join the Army. In his own words,
"'Cause you want to know if I'm moral enough to join the Army, burn women, kids, houses, and villages after being a litter bug."
Arlo spent the next year and a half writing the song about the events that occurred because of that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. In 1967, at the Newport Folk Festival, Arlo played the song live for the first time, in its entirety, to a crowd of about 300 people in a field. The small audience loved it, and the event organizers took notice. They asked him to play the song again later in the afternoon for a larger crowd. That crowd also loved it. Being such a hit, they asked him to play it yet again as the closing song on the main stage of the festival for about 20 to 30,000 people. The next day, he got call after call from different record companies, and shortly thereafter, he recorded the song in a New York studio in front of a live audience. A few months later, Arlo got a call from Arthur Penn, the director of The Miracle Worker, The Chase, and Bonnie and Clyde. Penn enjoyed the song and thought it would transition well into a movie. He already had producers interested, so all they had to do was expand the story. While the song was long, there wasn't really enough material there for a movie. So Penn, along with dramatic writing professor Venable Herndon, wrote the screenplay while consulting with Arlo. The film included the full story that was in the song, but now they added a bunch of fiction and drama to make the movie more engaging. They started filming in October of 1968 in Berkshire, Massachusetts. Arlo played himself, and many of the background characters were his friends. Some of the people lived locally, but the studio was afraid that since they were hippies, they would get baked and not show up to film. So they paid to put Arlo and many of the others up in a local motel and would bring them to the set each day. Alice was played by Patricia Quinn, and Ray was played by James Broderick. The real Alice had cameos in a few scenes. The young groupie was Shelley Plimpton, the future mother of actress Martha Plimpton. Sheriff William Obehine, known as Officer Obie, played himself in the movie. He was the one who arrested Arlo, and when he found out there was going to be a movie, he insisted on being able to play himself. He said, "If anyone's going to make a fool out of me, it might as well be me." Judge James Hannon also played himself in the movie. The real 8x10 color glossy pictures with the circles and arrows and a paragraph on the back of each one were used in the movie. Arlo and his friends wrote and played the soundtrack. Arlo's parents in the movie were actors, because his real father had died years earlier. After he finished recording Alice's Restaurant, he played it for his father, who died 2 weeks later. Arlo joked that it was the song that killed him. The events that took place in the movie were quite different from reality. Only 2 people lived in the church, Ray and Alice. Arlo wrote the song Alice's Restaurant for his friends, not as a jingle for the restaurant. In the movie, he was assaulted by the hippie-hating locals and suspended from school. In reality, Arlo said the folks in Billings couldn't have been nicer, and nothing like that ever happened the whole time he was there. He did drop out of college, but that wasn't until 6 months later. There was no Shelley. The giant wedding party never happened. In the movie, they had people coming from all over to the Thanksgiving dinner, but in reality, it was just a handful of local friends. Arlo was never romantically linked to Alice. The scene where Arlo turns down the groupie never happened. He said that because of that scene, though, more girls hit on him than ever before, thinking that he was this wonderfully sensitive guy. With things like the hippie commune and the squatters in the drug house, the movie was written as an older person's version of what they thought the hippie movement was doing. When Penn took the song and fleshed it out into a full movie, he wrote it as a statement about communes, with some social commentary about Vietnam, which is a pretty drastic change from the original song, which Arlo wrote as part anti-war and part anti-stupidity. After 10 weeks of filming, the movie wrapped. The movie opened 1 year later on August 19th, 1969, one day after Woodstock. Arlo played the song at Woodstock using the same 12-string he had in the movie. The real Alice did see the movie, but is not a fan. She was very upset by her portrayal and said that was someone else's version of her. While both the song and the movie were well before my time, I still find them fascinating. I first discovered the album while rummaging through a CD store in the 90s. They had a vinyl section, and a friend picked it up because he thought the cover was hilarious. Although for some reason in more recent releases, they added Arlo's head on the plate, which makes it even funnier. We listened to the song, and even though none of us were into folk music, we still found it to be charming. When we found out there was a movie, we tracked it down and immediately had a movie night. While I enjoyed the movie, it's bittersweet and quite a bit different from the song. The song's a humorous folk tune, and while the movie does incorporate elements from the song, it's more about a loss of innocence during the insanity of the 60s. Many people say the movie's funny, and it is. There are funny moments. But they seem to only remember the good, not the bad. The final scene is downright depressing. It ends with Alice staring off into the distance, lamenting the life that she'd never have. All her friends had left, and she was alone with Ray, who wanted nothing more than a non-stop party. In the real world, Alice eventually left Ray. They sold the church, Alice became an artist, and Ray went back to his childhood sweetheart. In 1995, Arlo found the church was up for sale, so he bought it and turned it into the Guthrie Center, an educational center for kids. Alice's restaurant Massacre, more commonly known simply as Alice's Restaurant, is now a Thanksgiving tradition. Every year, classic rock stations, and now satellite radio, play the song in its entirety on Thanksgiving. I don't listen to radio anymore, so for me, every year around Thanksgiving, I pull the song up on the internet and listen. The movie captured the spirit of the time, or at least the perception of the spirit of the time. Alice's Restaurant is nowhere near my usual wheelhouse, but it still holds a special place in my heart. For a lot of people seeing it now for the first time, it's a boring movie with a bunch of hippies where nothing happens. For me, it's about friendship, the hardships of growing up, love, death, and learning some of life's most valuable lessons after doing some really stupid shit.
Oh, yes, sir, Officer Obie. I cannot tell a lie. I put that envelope under that garbage.